Hey guys, it's Tim Miller from the Bulwark. I'm back with my friend and intersex correspondent, Andrew Egger. What's going on, man? How you doing?
I'm just racking up these correspondent titles. Doing good. Thanks for having me, Tim.
There's been a freak out on the right wing that you wrote about in the newsletter this morning over a women's boxing match in the Olympics between an Algerian boxer who some on the right are saying is trans, saying is a man, and a women's boxer from Italy. It's a pretty complex story. You'll be shocked to find out that those on the right are not interested in the complexities of this. So let's just take a quick look at just a couple clips. There have been so many, but here are a couple from Fox and from our friends over at Outkick the Coverage.
It's ridiculous. What are these idiots thinking?
Not fair and not safe.
Look at that. That's a guy. You're fighting a guy. Put him in the men's division and let him do his gender identity after the match.
We talked about this on Outnumbered yesterday. There are two biological men that are fighting in this division against the women.
It's crazy.
They're boxing.
You make a travesty of a sport that doesn't need this controversy.
And here's the thing, that person was banned by a major boxing competition before the Olympics, but the Olympics let them in.
For having high levels of testosterone and having XY chromosomes.
They have the best testing in all of sports. You easily could just say, listen, you can only fight and compete in the gender in which you were born. Those are just the rules.
I can't believe this is the world we live in right now, but you likely have seen a video of a man being able to compete in women's athletics. And that man was beating the crap out of a woman from Italy. Men who identify as women are going to be beating the crap out of women. So Trump has pledged.
We will not have men playing in women's sports. That will end immediately.
All right, Andrew. It's not just them. You wrote about it. I mean, Megyn Kelly was tweeting in all caps, "Attention, Kamala! Where are you, Kamala?" on this. J.D. Vance has weighed in. Trump's weighed in. So just talk about the freak out, and then we'll get into the details.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest kind of culture war spotlight we've ever gotten on like preliminary round in women's light featherweight boxing, at least in my lifetime. In my lifetime of watching that particular sport. No, it's a very interesting story, and I think the bottom line here is that it's a very complicated story that's getting compressed down into this culture war. First of all, from those clips you've seen already, just at the starting point, there's a lot of stuff that's false in there. This Algerian boxer, her name's Aman Khif. She is not transgender. We don't really know exactly what the circumstances are that surround her and her eligibility for this contest. But what happened was she's a woman from Algeria who's been boxing in this weight class and a couple other weight classes for years. She competed at the Tokyo Olympics 3 years ago in 2021. But last year, she ran into some controversy at a boxing championship out of the Olympics when she was about to go into a gold medal match. She and another Taiwanese boxer were both very abruptly disqualified by the International Boxing Organization after essentially a spot test of what they described as sort of gender eligibility. And what that wasn't completely clear. The president of that organization made a comment that suggesting it was a chromosomal test, so suggesting that this is a person who has XY chromosomes, typically male chromosomes, rather than the XX chromosomes that most women have. So that was last year. It did not kick up a lot of attention because, not a lot of people are paying attention to this sort of thing outside the Olympic cycle.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you there, Andrew. The Fox and Friends crew, Clay Travis, these people are very passionate about women's boxing, international women's boxing. They care about this very deeply, and their only interest here is their deep concern for the competitive integrity of international women's boxing. I'm certain that's the case.
Well, it is interesting because I saw a headline about this a few days ago, and just that this match was coming up, and I was kind of like, I wonder why this hasn't yet blown up into a massive men and women's sports culture war controversy. But obviously, you're right. I mean, like this is a thing that has sort of come about more recently. Like there's a lot more attention on this, and a lot of these sports organizations, they have started to put in like new rules into play that surround a lot of these things, which is part of the reason why you saw this controversy last year as opposed to, any time before. I really cannot stress enough just how much fog of war there is around this particular story. Like every line of information we're getting is is questionable or compromised in some way or another, because there's a reason why Aman Khif is allowed to box during this Olympics despite having been disqualified last year, and it's because the International Boxing Organization is not allowed to supervise the competition at these Olympic Games. They were kicked out by the International Olympic Committee earlier this year because they're a corrupt and self-dealing organization that has unfair reffing and allegations of throwing matches one way or another.
Corruption in boxing? No.
Yeah, I mean, so it's tricky, but so this organization is sort of compromised in that way, and so it's hard to know how much to trust that test. I mean, she was kicked out. The president of the organization is a Russian national. She was kicked out immediately after defeating a Russian opponent in 2023. So there's all kinds of weird cross lines to this. Even the test that she was supposedly administered in 2023. We don't know exactly what that test was because they haven't released those details. And B, the test was carried out in sort of this ad hoc, weird way, where she was already deep into the competition at the time. They administered it right before her gold medal bout, and so the International Olympic Committee basically released a statement yesterday saying, "What do you expect us to do? I mean, she didn't have any due process here." So it's. So you can't expect us to enforce these kinds of things based on this bizarre ad hoc test that was administered. So you have all that on the one side. On the other side, you do have the fact that there is this increasing awareness and increasing dialogue in especially a very elite level competition in women's sports where tiny differences in ability and natural talent can be the difference between a gold medal and being off the podium or not getting to go at all, we're given that there has been this increased visibility on trans issues in particular, but also just eligibility in general, because as we already said, it's not a trans issue. Yeah. There's increasingly been this kind of pressure to put some rules in place, just kind of governing what's fair game and what's not. And I think the bottom line here is that the main failure has been because these organizations, specifically that govern boxing, are relatively corrupt and there's all this institutional infighting and things. There's been difficulty in getting to a place where people can agree what the rules are for this specific thing, and that's what you saw play out here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that there are sometimes legitimate questions around like how people should police regulate women's sports, different groups. I mean, Martina Navratilova, is a lesbian advocate, progressive advocate, longtime advocate for Democrats and liberals. Has said that in tennis that there needs to be additional oversight over somebody that might be trying to get around the rules to break into the league where they have different levels of ability because they were assigned male at birth or whatever. And I'm open to listening to Martina have those questions. Like, the thing about this situation though that just explodes to such a degree that literally the Republican presidential and vice presidential candidate have made a statement on this, a false statement on how to govern a boxing match between an Algerian and a French person, where the president of the United States has no oversight, and the Algerian, just to repeat what you said, because I think it's important, was born a woman, was assigned female at birth, has been raised as a woman, is a woman. For all of her identifying characteristics, I guess that there's some some additional medical gray area around her status as intersex or whatever. I don't know how much you've looked into that.
Well, the problem is that the information is blurry, right? We essentially have the word of the president of this boxing organization, and then official statements from that organization suggesting that this was a chromosomal test, right? So which would suggest probably that she were intersex. And again, like just to really put paid to the whole trans thing, Algeria is not an LGBT friendly country, right? I mean, and the idea that they are sending a trans boxer, publicly to like try to scrape an extra medal, it's insane. But
Algeria hasn't gone woke.
No,
to your knowledge,
they're not among our woker nations.
Oh, okay.
But I mean, yes, like just to put a really fine point on it, like, from what we can tell, sort of the best kind of construction of the evidence that it's possible to put together. This is a person who was born a girl. Baby pops out, hey, it's a girl. Raised a girl. I mean, a lot of these for some intersex people, it does not even become apparent that they are intersex to them and their families until they hit puberty, right?
Yeah.
So this is
Middlesex was an amazing book about this. I don't know if you ever read Middlesex. It's so good.
So the whole, I mean, to make this part of trans dialogue in the United States is unbelievable. But then just to flip to the actual issue of sort of how it should all shake out in sports. I mean, I actually think that overall the Olympics has taken a pretty decent line on a lot of this stuff, where as sort of an institutional body, they have deferred to the individual overseeing authorities for the individual sports, which is why you have seen in certain areas, certain like kind of very high profile trans athletes like Leah Thomas from the United States not able to participate as women in the Olympics, because that's the decision that the international swimming organizations have made. But again, the problem here with that strategy is if one of those governing institutions for a specific sport, like in the case of boxing, turns out to be too corrupt to run the show, and then that kind of kicks the decision back up the tree to the Olympics, and in this case they didn't really make a decision, right? They've been very reactive about this whole thing. They didn't kind of like proactively get out in front of it. It's like, oh gosh, we have this big controversy on our hands. Now we need to figure out what we're doing with it.
The most delicious part about all this for me is, over at the Daily Wire, Matt Walsh's big shtick is going up to progressives and being like, what is a woman? Well, and he has been very active on Twitter, going insane about this situation, about how this is a man that is in boxing. And so it does kind of lend a question that I would have for Matt Walsh, which is, what is a woman?
Yeah, and
what is a woman? Have you seen her genitals, Matt Walsh? Like, it does kind of seem like he's demanding a dick check. I don't know about you, but I think that's kind of what's happening over on the Daily Wire.
Yeah, I started to get into this a little bit in the newsletter this morning before our editor Sam Stein very wisely sort of pulled me back from that particular rabbit hole. But
unwisely, I'm bringing it back up right now.
Well, it is interesting though, because I mean, you basically have these like the two main controversies around this gender stuff on the right recently have been the trans women in women's sports thing, the biological men in women's sports thing, but then also a lot of the kind of like language policing around women, right? I mean, you get people very angry when progressive people want to talk about, say, birthing people or people that can get pregnant, that sort of thing. Well, here is a person who, even though a lot of intersex people, they cannot, naturally conceive, but if she is an intersex woman, she would be able to become pregnant through IVF or something like that and bear a child and have that child. She would be a pregnant person. So like, it really does. It just kind of it breaks down these very simple, very binary categories that a lot of these people want to make the whole ball game. So yeah. A man when she is punching people out in the boxing ring, but a woman at other times, maybe, according to Matt Walsh. I don't know.
There is a famous story about this that I went down a rabbit hole. I don't know if you know this. There was a Polish sprinter in the 1964 Olympics. Iwa, I'm not even going to try to pronounce her last name. And she was disqualified. There was a big controversy about this. Everything is old is new again. There's no new stories out there in the world. She was disqualified because of, similarly, this idea of she's intersex and like whether she qualifies because of gender. The sex test used at the European Cup, not the Olympics, in 1967 identified her as not female. In 1968, she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. So, sometimes these things are a little more complicated than they seem. Andrew Egger, you are the person that kind of hashes through these complex and thorny issues, particularly related to pornography and gender identity. And I appreciate
how'd I get stuck with this job? Can I say one other thing thing on that note, which is that the whole point of these conversations on the right, the whole presupposition is that there's this trans ideology that is kind of sweeping the world, and that all of these controversies are knock-on effects of that in particular. And in reality, as long as there have been professional women's sports in the modern period, there have been these controversies, there have been these edge calls, and there have been these kinds of tests and judgment calls one way or the other on the part of these authorities of what you're going to have to do about them. So the culture war valence is way, way higher than it used to be, but the actual controversies are the same as they've been.
All right. Thank you, Andrew, for your expertise on that. I hear a little baby girl in the background that you got to take care of. So you get back to her. We'll be back here on this feed over the weekend and next week. We'll see y'all then. Peace.